Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the very long-awaited Doctor Who DVD Disambiguation. Yeah, I figured the 50th anniversary year was the best time to do it. I mean, A, because I'm rebuilding the collection so I can actually have the stuff in my hand and talk about it and show it to you. And B, because it's the 50th anniversary, and the complete collection of the classic series is actually going to be wrapped up this year. So we'll actually have all the surviving episodes of the classic series available on DVD at long last. Now, also being the 50th anniversary year means a lot of you were probably thinking it might be a good time to check out the classic series, especially perhaps if you're a fan of the new series that started in 2005 and aren't quite sure where to begin or what order the old ones go in and where the best jumping on points are and things like that. Should you start at the beginning? Should you start in the middle somewhere? Is there a particular doctor that you should start with? Well, I'm going to attempt to clear up all that and a whole lot more, starting today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Well, this particular episode of the Disambiguation, I'm not going to get into the breakdown quite yet, because I thought there was a little bit of information that applies to the entire collection that you might want to know about. One of the big ones that I hear from people all the time is they always ask, why isn't it just broken up into season sets like every other TV show? Well, there's a few reasons for that. I mean, first off, the early seasons in particular are incomplete. They're actually missing a pile of the early episodes. There was this whole big fiasco that went on in the 70s. Well, it's a fiasco now. At the time, it was just standard procedure. At the BBC, this is before the days of home video and such, so they would kind of judge whether or not to hang on to old recordings of their shows by how viable it was that they could be repeated. It's essentially, number crunching. They just wanted stuff that was going to continue to be profitable. And at the time, it did not appear that there would be much interest in old episodes of, say, Doctor Who, for example. They had entered into a whole new era in the 70s. They had just gone to full color. Prior to that, all the way up to the end of the 60s, they were in black and white. So in this bold new color era, I mean, they were thinking, well, how much interest is there going to be in some old black and white TV episodes? So Doctor Who and a lot of other shows basically got wiped, junked, burned, gone, destroyed, lost forever. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons you don't see season sets. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the whole missing episodes thing in another video, because that's a topic that can take a whole video itself, probably a few videos. But so that's one reason you don't see season sets. The other reason is just the way the show is structured. It isn't structured in the same way as a modern TV show, because rather than being individual episodes with self-contained stories, it's serialized, but each season is essentially a series of serials. So one story might take up anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4, most commonly 4, sometimes 6, 7, 8. There was even a 10-episode series, a 12-episode series, and a 14-episode series. Anyway, all these episodes combined to make one self-contained multi-part story. But all the stories were multi-part stories. I think in the entire history of the original series, there was only one self-contained episode. And that wasn't even really self-contained anyway, because it was actually a prologue to an epic 12-parter that followed a few weeks later. So, yeah, that's just the way the old series was. So, ever since the dawn of home video, and when Doctor Who started to come out on VHS, they started presenting them as stories, complete stories on one volume. So you would get, now in the early days, they would have all the episodes of a story linked together into a movie or omnibus format, as they call it. So essentially cutting out the cliffhanger endings and repeated scenes, like recaps, and the opening and closing titles between episodes, and just presenting each story as a self-contained movie. And that was a nice way to watch them in one respect, because it meant you get an entire story in one sitting. But completists like myself wanted to have the episodic format. So eventually the VHS volumes went to the episodic format and presented them as originally broadcast, complete, uncut, with opening and closing credits, recaps, and repeated scenes and whatnot intact. Now, there's not that much repetition. Essentially, each episode would end with a cliffhanger, and you'd have a brief recap of the last couple minutes of the previous episode at the beginning of the next episode to refresh your memory. So remember, these originally aired a week apart, and then it would carry on with the resolution of the cliffhanger, and then on to whatever happened in that episode. So yeah, in short, it's a series of serials rather than a series of self-contained single or double episode stories, much like the new series, where the new series is more in the modern format of individual stories with an overarching story arc that runs the length of the season. That really wasn't the way it was done back then. There were a few cases where they would have overarching stories that linked the individual stories together, but for the most part, the individual serials within a season were self-contained stories with very little reference to each other. I mean, you could easily skip one and move on to the next, or a couple stories later, and you wouldn't be lost. You'd be able to follow what was going on. So I guess the long and the short of it is the DVDs are done that way simply because the show's always been done that way. It was shown on television that way. You know, PBS would show either the individual episodes or would have the omnibus editions on weekends. I think I talked about that in my Journey of a Whovian video. It's just the way the show's always been presented, as, you know, focusing on one serialized story at a time rather than seasons as a whole. Plus, the other reason being a lot of fans have personal favorite stories within each season, and they may not like all the stories that season, so they just want to pick and choose the ones that they like and just kind of discard the rest. And that's fine. I mean, it's up to each individual how they want their collection to be. Myself, obviously, I'm a completist. I want the whole thing. I see good in all the episodes, even the so-called stinkers. But if you want to be picky, then at least having them broken up by individual story means you can pick and choose specifically the stories you want. Now, the other complaint I hear from people is the price of the individual volumes. Like, you take just one single keep case volume here, you could be paying anywhere from $10 to $30 or $40, depending on what the story is, depending how many episodes it is, depending how much extras there are, depending how many discs it is, that sort of thing. Also depending on how much remastering was involved. I noticed the older episodes from the 60s generally tend to go for a little bit more than the later episodes, which, because the older episodes required a lot more cleanup and remastering and such, so there was a lot more involved in that process, I guess, so that's kind of why they tend to be a little more expensive. But here's the thing. Doctor Who on DVD is kind of unique, because typically when you buy a season set of a show, you'll get all the episodes and you'll get a handful of extras that just kind of encompass the entire season. With Doctor Who, because everything is structured story by story rather than season by season, you get an absolute wealth of extras on every single DVD. So at first glance, people think, what, I'm paying $25 for 4 episodes? That's ridiculous. Yeah, you're getting 4 episodes of the show, beautifully remastered. I mean, they've never looked or sounded this good before. Commentaries on almost every single episode. In fact, most of them do have commentaries on every single episode with surviving cast and crew. And very often a second disc full of extras, archival stuff, and newly made documentaries about the making of that specific story. I mean, come on. There's not very many shows that go to that length in terms of extras. I mean, you get a ton of stuff. So you might have a 90-minute story, 4 episodes, roughly 90 to 100 minutes in length, but then you might also have 3 hours of featurettes and behind the scenes and archival stuff, plus commentaries on every single episode. They basically treat every single story in this collection as if it's the single most important story in the history of the series, and they make it as deluxe as possible. There's a couple of exceptions, which we'll go into when we get to them, where they kind of didn't seem to put in quite as much effort. I don't know why. Maybe they weren't as popular a story, but whatever. The vast majority of them, I'd say a good 99% of them, are, you can pick any random one off the shelf and it will be very deluxe indeed. Even the single disc editions, where they have like a 4-part story and it's just a single disc, they'll still have a couple hours worth of extras on there, plus commentaries on all the episodes. So even the lower end releases get the deluxe treatment. So it really is worthwhile. Now, some people have been saying, well, maybe with the fact that they're completing the series, they'll release them as season sets. Well, that's not impossible. I mean, it's perfectly possible they might do that. but I think it would be prohibitively expensive, especially if they decided to keep all of the content of the existing individual volumes. So I don't know how viable that is. I can't see a complete series set coming out because that would literally be like $3,000 to get that, and that would be kind of discounted. So you are looking at a fairly hefty investment if you're looking to get the entire series. I generally have been shopping on eBay, sorting by lowest price plus shipping, and just finding the best deals that I can. Yeah, so essentially that's it in a nutshell. There is good reason for it being structured the way that it is. You can't really equate Doctor Who and the way it's put together with a modern series, because TV back then was done quite differently. The show itself is structured differently from any other show I know of. The only other show I can think of that gets even close to the same deluxe treatment that Doctor Who gets on DVD is Red Dwarf. That's the only show I can think of that gets even close to the same level of deluxe treatment as Doctor Who does on DVD. So the way that I'm going to do this disambiguation is pretty straightforward. I figured I'm going to make it as easy for you as possible. So you want seasons? I'll give you seasons. Each episode of this disambiguation is going to cover one season of the original series. So all 26 seasons, which means you'll be getting 26 episodes of this disambiguation. And for those wondering, yes, I will be covering the new series as well. But we're going to do everything chronologically, so we're going to get to the new series when we get to the new series. For now, we're going to focus on the classic series, because I think that's more than enough to take up time. Now, you may be thinking, well, with the new series, what's the big deal? How hard can that be? It's clearly numbered seasons. Yes, it is. However, there are also several spin-off shows which actually are canon to the main series and tie into the continuity. There's also a lot of specials. There's mini episodes, there's prequels, there's TARDISodes, there's charity episodes. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is all considered canon that fits within the continuity of the main seasons and within the continuity of the episodes in the seasons themselves. So when we get to that, I'm going to break the whole thing down for you chronologically. Absolute 100%, no discussion, chronological order, the way you should see it to get maximum impact out of the epicness that is the new series of Doctor Who. And it really is quite epic. But we'll get to that when we get to it. For now, we're going to focus on Classic Who because, quite frankly, I think that's the one that's confusing most of you more than anything. Now, you may be wondering, well, what about the Lost episodes? How does that figure in? Well, the good news is that with the Lost episodes, while they don't have the video of the episodes, they do have the complete audio of the episodes, thanks to some tech-savvy fans back in the 60s who actually recorded the episodes on reel-to-reel audio tape back in the day. How cool is that? So the BBC has copies of all those fan recordings, has cleaned them up, remastered them, and issued them as audio CDs with linking narration by some of the surviving cast members to basically explain what's going on when there's not a lot to hear, nobody's talking, so they'll explain the action of what you would be seeing, so it kind of plays it like a radio play. So the good news is all of the missing episodes have been released on audio CDs. So all of these audio tracks, and they're the complete audio of the original episodes, opening, closing titles. They got all the voice and music and sound effects. It's the audio recorded straight off the TV, and it's all been beautifully cleaned up and remastered, and they're just fantastic. I've heard quite a few of them by this point, actually. Still not all of them. There's still a few I haven't listened to. Great stuff. So in the interest of completeness, I'll go over both versions of the season. Essentially, here's the DVDs of the episodes and where you can expect gaps in the seasons because there's episodes missing. But at the same time, here's the CDs that are available of those missing episodes and where they fit into those gaps. So between the two of them, if you really want to be a completist, you can get the DVDs of the complete episodes, the CDs of the missing episodes, and then together have the complete story. So we're going to cover everything. We're going to make sure you're well taken care of. Now, some of you may be wondering about the Big Finish audio adventures and how they fit into the continuity. Well, first off, those aren't considered canon. As fun as they are, the general rule of thumb seems to be The only thing that's canon is what is in the show. Anything else is considered, expanded universe stuff or what have you. The Big Finish audio adventures are great. For those who don't know, they're a series of full cast sound effects, music, audio dramas featuring all the surviving actors who played the Doctor in the original series, basically the 4th through 8th Doctors. They've been doing adventures with them for close to 10 years now, and it's great. And they get back any surviving actors they can and do all new stories featuring the classic Doctors with the classic companions fighting new and classic monsters, and the stories are actually set within the continuity of the TV series. So it's pretty cool. Most of them are pretty clear where they fall into the continuity. They'll tell you on the CD cover, but there's getting close to 200 or so of those, not counting all the spin-offs of the audio adventures. So honestly, that would be far beyond the scope of this Disambiguation. So we're going to focus strictly on the televised adventures and where those are available and what formats they're available and, what order they go in, most importantly. So it's going to be a hell of a ride. So sit back, relax. Oh, and please don't put your feet up on the TARDIS control console because, you don't want to be hitting buttons and levers and stuff by accident. Don't know where we'll end up. And, yeah. So next time, we go right back to the beginning. The start of the legend. History in the making. Season 1 of the original series of Doctor Who. Season 1, thankfully, is pretty much intact. There's actually only one story that's incomplete in the entire season. And there are options to experience that story. But we'll talk about that next time in Part 1 of the Doctor Who DVD Disambiguation. Until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara.